Hello. This is weird. I haven't streamed in so long. Hi, Lexi. How are you? I have my water. I have my tea. Squeaky. I have the book, which is, you know, important. Hopefully my voice will hold up to it. Doing well, that's good. I'm cold. And my hedgehog blanket, which was really supposed to be for me and Keegan, but I kind of stole it. I'm good. I didn't sleep much, so we'll see how this goes. Which is, you know, keeping with tradition, that's what happens when I do stream. I feel like. This is also a new experience because I have a new monitor, so I'm actually looking at things on the monitor. I'm actually looking at chat where you are. And then my OBS is over here on my dinky TV screen. And if you let me know how the music is in comparison with my voice, that would be great. What else do I need to do here? I'm gonna start some Nutcracker music. Maybe. Spotify's being weird. Hello? Oh no. Everything's breaking! My chat is not responding. Uh-oh. I see yes, Nutcracker music, but it says it's not responding. Hopefully I'm still live. Looks like I'm still live. Right. I will be restarting my chat, I guess. So hold on one second. Oh, is it just the entire internet right now? I see you still. Okay, that's good. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Yeah, it just throughout my entire internet. Okay. Google Chrome is not responding. Hang on while Windows reports it to Microsoft. Well, it's because I'm doing 50 billion things at once and the computer doesn't like it. And my phone's doing something weird. It's updating my Apple ID settings, but it just stays on the loading screen forever. Makes no sense. And now I'm waiting for Windows to open. You know, it wouldn't be a stream for me without technical difficulties. Yes, I would like to restore. But are you actually gonna restore? Because it doesn't look like you're gonna restore. Okay, nice. That's, yes. Okay, there. It's claiming to load my chat pop out. This is fun. Sorry for the technical difficulties as usual. Also, this is the thing, the follower thing is not correct. I do believe we have 156. No.
Smana is like very outgoing.
No. I told you.
Compassionate. She has lot of friends and she always has a smiling face.
Okay,
She is very.
there we go. Okay, have that for later. Hi! Burning snowman. You know what the burning snowman needs? Needs that. The twig. Okay. Now. Let's start that. That's very quiet. And it'll probably get louder as we go. Just let me know how the music is if I need to adjust it at all. There we go. That's perfect. You have the left and the right. I still only have the right. Let's see how much louder it gets in a second. Pretty loud. Okay. Yeah, just let me know how it sounds, because I have no idea. And I gotta turn it down so I won't be so distracted. This Nutcracker music is distracting for me. And during the entire, like, first act, well, not the entire first act, but the party scene, I'll be thinking about what I'm going to be doing on stage on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Not that it's that much. So, okay, today we are reading The Nutcracker, adapted by, please don't make fun of my French, Anna and CJ if you watch the VOD, Alexandre Dumas. I don't know how you say his first name. Anyways, this is what we're reading. Isn't this beautiful? And there's white shoes on the back. Barnes & Noble. Got it. Was it last year that I got it? I believe it was last year that I got it. Yeah, it was. So it's real cute. And I'm going to be keeping track of my time. And yeah, I'll go ahead and start with the introduction, because it's a little short thing about how this story in particular came to be. It'd be nice if my pen works. Hey, Mid is supposed to come today, and it said it was out for delivery, so if I don't get it today, and I will be sending some angry tweets to her interactive. Mid-hype! Alright, if the music is too loud, I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. It will frequently adjust as well. Let me know if it's too loud, because it's gonna be quiet at the beginning. Now it's really quiet again. That's the problem with orchestral music when we're on stream. I'm not on stage yet. Okay. Alright, let's get started with the introduction at 24:25. Every Christmas, millions of people, young and old, delight in the Nutcracker Ballet, which tells the story of an enchanted nutcracker who one Christmas night is turned into a handsome prince through the love of a young girl, and who takes her on a fantastic journey to a magical land of sweets and spices. The ballet score, by renowned Russian composer, I don't want to butcher the name, Tchaikovsky, has become a beloved Christmas tradition, as recognizable as any Christmas carol or holiday song. Yet for all the popularity of this holiday confection, few people are aware that the ballet has its origins in a work of fiction written almost 3/4 of a century before its first staging, one that is very different in its telling from the story most see unfold on the ballet stage, or play on television and movie screens. The story behind the Nutcracker is the creation of Ernst Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann, a Prussian civil servant who wrote fiction in his free time between postings that took him from Warsaw to Berlin. In his novels and stories, Hoffmann, a progressive thinker, celebrated the power of art and the imagination to excite the mind and awaken the spirit. The tale of fantasy proved the perfect vehicle for what Hoffmann hoped to achieve through his writing, and his first collection of fantasies, published in 1814, earned him an appreciative audience among adult readers. Hoping similarly to reach younger readers, in 1816, Hoffmann contributed 2 stories to a 2-volume anthology of fairy tales. Among them was the tale whose title translates as The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, which he had written for the children of his colleague and fellow civil servant Julius Hitzig. I'm on stage now, by the way. Hoffmann later included The Nutcracker and the Mouse King in his 4-volume compilation The Serapion Brethren. The fictional Serapions are a quartet of storytellers modeled on the literary salon that Hoffmann himself presided over in Berlin, and their discussions about the interplay between the real and the imagined in the text that frames each story very probably echo those of their real-life counterparts. Lothair, the teller of The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, defends it against his colleagues' criticisms that it will baffle younger readers. You're getting an ad? I'm gonna wait for my friend so she can hear the rest of the... We're looking at the Christmas tree right now. Ooh, wonderful, beautiful. My daughter comes out and pulls me along. Sorry, I'm just waiting for you. I don't know why there was an ad because I chose for it to be at the beginning. So I don't understand why that didn't happen. So I'm sorry about that. Oh, now the children are dancing. Anyways, I will continue. You didn't miss anything. Lothair, you didn't get one at the beginning. I don't know why. Lothair, the teller of The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, defends it against his colleagues' criticisms that it will baffle young readers, saying, oh, you know what? Me too, don't I? Saying, I think it is a great mistake to suppose that clever, imaginative children, and it is only they who are in question here, should content themselves with the empty nonsense which is so often set before them under the name children's tales. They want something much better, and it is surprising how much they see and appreciate which escapes a good, honest, well-informed papa. By including it in a book that also features tales for adults, Hoffmann clearly indicated that he did not think the story would be of interest only to children. Credit for the widespread popularity that the story of the Nutcracker has achieved since is due largely to French author Alexandre Dumas, who in 1845 adapted a version of Hoffmann's tale as an entertainment for younger readers under the title The History of a Nutcracker. One of the best-selling writers of the 19th century, Dumas rendered his version of Hoffmann's tale during the same years that saw the publication of his immensely popular novels The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. It was translated from the French into English in 1847 as part of London book publisher Chapman and Hall's Picture Storybooks series for young readers, featuring more than 200 illustrations by George Bertal, reproduced throughout this edition, who had also illustrated an edition of the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen. It was Dumas' more precious treatment of Hoffmann's complex fairy tale that caught the eye of Ivan Vyzvolovsky, director of Russia's Imperial Theaters in the early 1890s. Vyzvolovsky recommended the tale to Imperial Ballet Master Marius Petipa for adaptation to the ballet stage by Tchaikovsky, and Petipa wrote the libretto to pair with Tchaikovsky's score. The Nutcracker debuted at the St. Petersburg Imperial Theater in 1892. It was only a modestly popular ballet until 1954, when New York City ballet choreographer George Balanchine presented the version that has become the standard for more than half a century. As with Hoffman's Tale, Dumas' The History of a Nutcracker presents a much fuller story than that distilled into the ballet libretto, one that includes the years-long history of the Nutcracker's origins and enchantment, and an account of how it came into the possession of the enigmatic Herr Drosselmayer. Though it presents a different and sometimes darker Nutcracker than the elegant showpiece that has come down to us from ballet stage and screen, it still glimmers with the magic that has made the story, like the ballet, a classic Christmas fantasy and a timeless tale of wonder. And this is the first illustration. So, we will begin with the preface. Some of this history is very familiar. I read the New York City Ballet Nutcracker picture book last night at work. Oh, nice! Did you read it, like, on your own time, or was it, like, a story time, or... That's cool, though. Here comes Drosselmayer, which in our ballet is known as Uncle Schubert. Manning the youth desk. Oh, that's cool, though. Awesome. Alright. Take a sip of my tea here. Is the music too loud? Ooh, hot. Music is good. Okay, thank you. I love this music so much. Alright, the preface, which shows how the author was forced to relate the history of the Nutcracker of Nuremberg. There was a juvenile party at the house of my friend Lord M, and I had helped to add to the number and noise of the company by taking my little daughter. It is true that in half an hour, during which I joined in 4 or 5 games of Blind Man's Buff, Hot Cockles, and Hunt the Slipper, in spite of the noise which was made by a couple of dozen delightful little rogues from 8 to 10 years old, and who seemed to try which would talk the loudest, I split out of the drawing room and sought a certain snug parlor which I knew, and where I hoped to enjoy a little peace for an hour or so. I had effected my retreat with as much skill as success, escaping not only without being perceived by the juvenile guests, which was not very difficult considering how intent they were upon their games, but also unnoticed by their parents, which was not so easy a matter. I had reached the wished-for parlor when I observed on entering it that it was for the moment converted into a supper room, the sideboards being heaped up with confectionery and other refreshments. Now, as these appearances seemed to promise that I should not be disturbed until supper time, I threw myself into a comfortable armchair, quite delighted with the idea that I was about to enjoy an hour's peace after the dreadful noise which had deafened me in the drawing room. I don't know exactly how it was, but at the end of about 10 minutes, I fell fast asleep. I cannot say how long I had thus lost all knowledge of what was passing around, when I was suddenly aroused by loud peals of laughter. I opened my eyes in terror and saw nothing but the beautifully painted ceiling over my head. Then I tried to get up, but the attempt was useless, for I was fastened to my chair as firmly as Gulliver was on the shore of Lilliput. I immediately understood in what a scrape I had got myself. I had been surprised in the enemy's country, and was a prisoner of war. The best thing for me to do in such a case was to put a good face upon the matter, and entreat for my liberty. My first proposal was to take my conquerors the very next morning to Florence's, and treat them to anything they liked. But unhappily, the moment was not well chosen for such an offer. I was addressing myself to an audience already well stuffed with tarts, and whose hands were filled with patties, sorry. My proposal was therefore refused in plain terms. I then offered to take the entire party to Vauxhall next evening, and amuse them with the exhibition of fireworks. The proposal was well received by the little boys, but the little girls would not listen to it, because they were dreadfully afraid of fireworks. They could not endure the noise of the crackers, and the smell of the gunpowder annoyed them. I was about to make a third offer, when I heard a sweet little musical voice whispering in the ears of a companion certain words which made me tremble. "Ask Papa, who writes novels, to tell us some pretty story." I was on the point of protesting against this, but my voice was drowned by cries of, "Oh yes, a story! We will have a story!" "But my dear children," I said, as loud as I could, "you ask me the most difficult thing in the world. A story indeed. Ask me to recite one of Gay's fables, or My Name is Norval, if you will, and I may consent. But a story? We don't want anything out of the speaker," cried the children all together. "We want a story. My dear little friends, if there is no if in the cause, we will have a story. There is no but. Oh, I'm sorry. But, my dear little friends, I say again, there is no but. We will have a story." "Yes, we will have a story. We will have a story," now echoed on all sides, and in a manner which was too positive to object to any longer. "Well," I said with a sigh, "if you must, you must." "Ah, that's capital!" cried my little tormentors. "But I must tell you one thing," said I. "The story I'm about to relate is not my own." "Never mind that, so long as it amuses us." I must confess that I was a little vexed to think that my audience set so light a value upon my own writings. "Whose tale is it then, sir?" asked a pretty voice, belonging no doubt to some little being more curious than the others. "It is by Hoffman, miss. Have you ever heard of Hoffman?" "No, sir, I never heard of him." "And what is the name of your story, sir?" asked a young gentleman who, being the son of the nobleman that gave the party, felt a right to question me. "The History of a Nutcracker," was my answer. "Does the title please you, my dear Henry?" "Ahem! I don't think the title promises anything particularly fine. But never mind, go on. If it does not please us, we will stop you, and you must begin another. And so on, I can tell you, until you really do fix upon a good one." "One moment," I exclaimed. "I will not accept those conditions. If you are grown-up persons, well and good. Nevertheless, those are our conditions. If not, a prisoner you must remain with us forever." Oh, hi, Boo. I got a kitty in here. "My dear Henry, you are a charming boy, well brought up, and I shall be much surprised if you do not someday become Prime Minister of England. Let me go free, and I will do as you ask." "On your word of honor?" "On my word of honor." At the same moment, I felt the 1,000 threads that held me suddenly become loose. Each of the little tormentors had set to work to untie a knot, and in half a minute I was at liberty. Now, as everyone must keep his word, even when it is pledged to children, I desired my audience to sit round me, and when the children had all placed themselves in a manner so comfortable that I fancied they would soon fall off to sleep in their chairs, I began my story in the following manner. He's about to break the Nutcracker. It's broken. We're all sad. Okay. Godfather Drosselmayer. Once upon a time, there lived in Nuremberg, in Germany, a judge of great respectability, and who was called Judge Silberhaus, which means Silver House. This judge had a son and daughter. The son was 9 years old and was named Fritz. The daughter, who was 7.5, was called Mary. They were two beautiful children, but so different in disposition and features that no one would have believed them to be brother and sister. Fritz was a fine, stout boy with ruddy cheeks and roguish looks. He was very impatient and stamped on the floor whenever he was contradicted, for he thought that everything in the world had been made for his amusement or to suit his fancy. In this humor, he would remain until the judge, annoyed by his cries and screams, or by his stamping, came out of his study and, raising his forefinger, said with a frown, "Master Fritz!" These 2 words were quite sufficient to make Master Fritz wish that the earth would open up and swallow him. As for his mother, it was no matter how much or how often she raised her forefinger, for Fritz did not mind her at all. His sister Mary was, on the contrary, a delicate and pale child, with long hair curling naturally and flowing over her little white shoulders like a flood of golden light upon a vase of alabaster. She was sweet, amiable, bashful, and kind to all who were in sorrow, even to her dolls. She was very obedient to her mamma, and never contradicted her governess, Miss Trudchen, so that Mary was beloved by everyone. Now the 24th of December, 17 blah blah blah, had arrived. You all know, my dear young friends, that the 24th of December is called Christmas Eve, being the day before the one on which the Redeemer Jesus was born. But I must now explain something to you. You have all heard, perhaps, that every country has its peculiar customs, and the best read amongst you are aware that Nuremberg, in Germany, is a town famous for its toys, puppets, and playthings, of which it exports great quantities to other countries. We're about to dance. You will admit, therefore, that the little boys and girls of Nuremberg, it's really loud, isn't it? Ought to be the happiest children in the world, unless indeed they are like the inhabitants of Ostend, who seem only to delight in their oysters for the purpose of sending them to foreign markets. Germany, being quite a different country from England, has altogether other customs. In England, New Year's Day is the grand day for making presents, so that many parents would be very glad if the year always commenced with the 2nd of January. But in Germany, the great day for presents is the 24th of December, the one preceding Christmas Day. Moreover, in Germany, children's presents are given in a peculiar way. A large shrub is placed upon a table in the drawing room, and to all its branches are hung the toys to be distributed among the children. Such playthings as are too heavy to hang to the shrub are placed on the table, and the children are then told that it is their guardian angel who sends them all those pretty toys. This is a very innocent deception, after all, and perhaps it can scarcely be called a deception, because all the good things of this world are sent to us by heaven. Sorry. I need scarcely tell you that among those children of Nuremberg who received most presents were the son and daughter of Judge Silberhaus. For besides their father and mother, who doted on them, they also had a godfather who loved them dearly, and whose name was Drosselmayer. I must describe in a few words the portrait of this illustrious person, who occupied in the town of Nuremberg a position almost as high as that of Judge Silberhaus himself. Godfather Drosselmayer, who was a great physician and doctor of medicine, was by no means a very good-looking person. Well, hello? Hi. My cat says hello. He was a tall, thin man, about 6 feet high, but who stooped very much, so that in spite of the length of his legs, he could almost pick up his handkerchief if it fell, without stooping any lower. His face was wrinkled as a golden brennet that had withered and fallen from the tree. Being blind of the right eye, he wore a black patch, and being entirely bald, he wore a shining and frizzled wig, which he had made himself with spun glass, such as you may have seen the glass blowers spin at the Adelaide Gallery or Polytechnic Institution. Oh, I'm reading. He was, however, compelled, for fear of damaging this ingenious contrivance, to carry his hat under his arm. His remaining eye was sparkling and bright, and seemed not only to perform its own duty, but that of its absent companion, so rapidly did it glance round any room which Godfather Drosselmayer was desirous to scrutinize in all points, or fix upon any person whose secret thoughts he wished to read. Now, Godfather Drosselmayer, who was a learned doctor, did not follow the example of those physicians who allow their patients to die, but occupied his time in giving life to dead things. I mean that, by studying the formation of men and animals, he had gained so deep a knowledge of the manner in which they are made, that he was able to manufacture men who could walk, bow to each other, and go through their exercises with a musket. He also made ladies who danced and played upon the harpsichord, the harp, and the viol, dogs that ran, carried, and barked, birds that flew, hopped, and sang, and fish that swam and ate crumbs of bread. He had even succeeded in making puppets and images of Punch utter a few words. Not many, it's true, but such as papa, mama, etc. The tones were certainly harsh, and always the same in sound, because you can... sorry. Because you can very well understand that all this was done merely by means of machinery, concealed inside the toys, and no machinery can ever perform the same wonders as the beings which God has created. Nevertheless, in spite of all difficulties, Godfather Drosselmayer did not despair of being someday able to make real men, real women, real dogs, real birds, and real fish. It is scarcely necessary to add that his two godchildren, to whom he had promised the first proofs of his success in this line, awaited the happy moment with great impatience. Godfather Drosselmayer, having reached this state of perfection in mechanical science, was a most useful man to his friends. Thus, for instance, if a timepiece at the house of Judge Silverhouse got out of order, in spite of the attentions of the usual clockmakers, if the hand suddenly stopped, if the tick-tick seemed to go badly, or if the wheels inside would not move, Godfather Drosselmayer was immediately sent for, and he hastened to the house as quick as he could, for he was a man devoted to the art of mechanics. He was no sooner shown the poor clock than he instantly opened it, took out the works, and placed them between his knees. Then, with his eye glittering like a carbuncle, and his wig laid upon the floor, he drew from his pocket a number of little tools which he had made himself, and the proper use of which he alone knew. Choosing the most pointed one, he plunged it into the very midst of the works, to the great alarm of little Mary, who could not believe that the poor clock did not suffer from the operation. But in a short time, when the old gentleman had touched the works in various parts, and placed them again in their case, or on their stand, or between the four pillars of the timepiece, as the case might be, the clock soon began to revive, to tick as loud as ever, and to strike with its shrill, clear voice at the proper time. Okay, calm down, Nutcracker. A circumstance that gave new life, as it were, to the room itself, which without it seemed a melancholy place. Moreover, in compliance with the wishes of little Mary, who was grieved to see the kitchen dog turning the spit, Godfather Drosselmayer made a wooden dog, which by means of mechanism connected inside, turned the spit without annoyance to itself. Turk, who had done this duty for 3 years until he had become quite shaky all over, was now able to lie down in peace in front of the kitchen fire and amuse himself by watching the movements of his successor. Thus, after the judge's wife, after Fritz, and after Mary, the dog Turk was certainly the next inmate of the house who had most reason to love and respect Godfather Drosselmayer. Turk was indeed grateful, and showed his joy whenever Drosselmayer drew near the house, by leaping up against the front door and wagging his tail, even before the old gentleman had knocked. On the evening of the 24th of December, just as the twilight was approaching, Fritz and Mary, who had not been allowed to enter the drawing room all day, were huddled together in a corner of the dining parlor. Miss Trudchen, the governess, was knitting near the window, to which she had moved her chair in order to catch the last rays of daylight. The children were seized with a kind of vague fear, because candles had not been brought into the room, according to custom, so they were talking in a low tone to each other, just as children talk when they are afraid. "Fritz," said Mary, "I am sure Papa and Mamma are busy in preparing the Christmas tree. For ever since the morning, I have heard a great deal going on in the drawing room, which we are forbidden to enter." "And I know," said Fritz, "by the way Turk barked 10 minutes ago, that Godfather Drosselmayer has arrived." "Oh, I wonder what our dear kind godfather has brought us," exclaimed Mary, clapping her little hands. "I'm sure it will be a beautiful garden planted with trees, and with a beautiful river running between the banks, covered with flowers. And on the river, too, there will be some silver swans with collars of gold, and a little girl will bring them sweet cake, which they will eat out of her apron." "In the first place, miss," said Fritz, in that authoritative tone which was natural to him, and which his parents considered to be one of his greatest faults, "you must know that swans do not eat sweet cake." "I thought they did," answered Mary, "but as you are a year and a half older than I, you must know best." Fritz tossed his head up with an air of importance. "And for my part," he continued, "I feel certain that if Godfather Drosselmayer brings anything at all, it will be a castle with soldiers to watch it, and enemies to attack it. We shall then have some famous battles." "I do not like battles," said Mary. "If he does bring a castle, as you think he will, it must be for you. I shall, however, take care of the wounded." "Whatever it is that he brings," returned Fritz, "you know very well that it is neither for you nor for me, because the toys which Godfather Drosselmayer gives us are always taken away again immediately afterwards, under pretense that they really are works of great art. Then, you know, they're always put into the great cupboard with the glass doors, and on the top shelves, which Papa himself can only reach when he stands upon a chair. So, after all, I much prefer the toys which Papa and Mamma give us, and which we are allowed to play with until we break them into 1,000 pieces." "And so do I," answered Mary, "only we must not say so to Godfather." "And why not?" "Because he would feel annoyed to think that we do not like his toys as much as those which Papa and Mamma give us. He gives them to us thinking to please us, and it would be wrong to tell him the contrary." "Oh, nonsense!" cried Fritz. "Miss Mary is quite right, Master Fritz," said Dame Trudchen, who was generally very silent and only spoke on important occasions. "Come," said Mary hastily, in order to prevent Fritz from giving an impudent answer to the poor governess. "Let us guess what our parents intend to give us. For my part, I told Mamma, but upon condition that she would not scold, that Miss Rose, my doll, grows more and more awkward in spite of the lessons which I am constantly giving her, and that she does nothing but fall upon her nose, which never fails to leave most disagreeable marks upon her face, so that I can no longer take her into decent society, because her face does not at all correspond with her frocks." "And I," said Fritz, "did not hesitate to assure Papa that a nice little horse would look admirably well in my stables. I also took the opportunity to inform him that no army can possibly exist without cavalry, and that I want a squadron of hussars to to complete the division which I command. Hi. Hi, what are you doing? You want to say hi? Hi. What are you doing? Do you see yourself on the TV? You're so cute. You're the cutest little kitty in the world. Are you mad at me? Yeah, you are? Okay. That's nice. My cat's mad at me. I got a host. Thank you for the host, Terry. Go in, baby. These words made Miss Trudgeon conclude that the moment was favorable for her to speak a second time. Master Fritz and Miss Mary, said she, you know very well that it is your guardian angel who sends and blesses all those fine toys which are given to you. Do not therefore say beforehand what you want, because the angel knows much better than you what will please you. Oh, cried Fritz, and yet last year he sent me foot soldiers, although, as I have just said, I should have been better satisfied with a squadron of hussars. For my part, I have only to thank my good angel, said Mary. For did I but ask for a doll last year, and I not only had the doll, but also a beautiful white dove with red feet and beak. In the meantime, the night had altogether drawn in, and the children, who by degrees spoke lower and lower, and grew closer and closer together, fancied that they heard the wings of their guardian angels fluttering near them, and a sweet music in the distance, like that of an organ accompanying the hymn of the Nativity. Hear you, Boo, beneath the gloomy arches of a cathedral. You ready for snow? Waltz the snowflakes. Okay. Presently, a sudden light shone upon the wall for a moment, and Fritz and Mary believed that it was their guardian angel. Hi! Who, after depositing the toys in the drawing room, flew away in the midst of golden luster to visit other children who were expecting him with the same impatience as themselves. Okay, the music's just really quiet. Turn it up a little. Immediately afterward, a bell rang. The door was thrown violently open, and so strong a light burst into the apartment that the children were dazzled, and uttered cries of surprise and alarm. The judge and his wife then appeared at the door, and took the hands of their children, saying, "Come, little dears, and see what the guardian angels have sent you." The children hastened to the drawing room, and Miss Trudgeon, having placed her work upon a chair, followed them. Boo boo, boo boo, boo boo, boo boo, boo boo, boo boo. Hi Terry, how are you? Isn't this weird that I'm actually streaming? Thank you for the snowflakes. Boo's sad. She wants on my lap, but there's not enough room, for one thing, and the chair's tiny. And she'll stay like a minute, and then she runs off. Oh, you guys like my mug? Star Wars is tomorrow, can you believe it? And then let me show you the other side. That would be my mug. Godpapa Drosselmayer, why do you keep going out and coming in by the same door? You must be tired of going backward and forward like that. Come, enter by that door there, and come out by this one here. And Fritz pointed with his finger to the doors of the two towers. No, that cannot be done, answered Godfather Drosselmayer. Well then, said Fritz, do me the pleasure of going up those stairs and taking the place of that gentleman at the window. Then tell him to go down to the door. It is impossible, my dear Fritz, again said the doctor. At all events, the children have danced enough. Let them go and walk, while the gentlemen and ladies who are now walking dance in their turn. But you are not reasonable, you little rogue, cried the godpapa, who began to grow angry. The mechanism must move in a certain way. Then let me go into the house, said Fritz. Now you are silly, my dear boy, observed the judge. Oh, sorry, that's the father. Now you are silly, my dear boy, observed the judge. You see that it is impossible for you to enter the house, since the vanes on the top of the towers scarcely come up to your shoulders. Fritz yielded to this reasoning and held his tongue, but in a few moments, seeing that the ladies and gentlemen kept on walking, that the children would not leave off dancing, that the gentleman with the furred cloak appeared and disappeared at regular intervals, and that Godfather Drosselmayer did not leave the door, he again broke his silence. My dear godpapa, said he, if all these little figures can do nothing more than what they are doing over and over again, you may take them away tomorrow, for I do not care about them, and I like my horse much better, because it runs when I choose, and my hussars, because they maneuver at my command, and wheel to the right or left, or march forward or backward, and are not shut up in any house like your poor little people who can only move over and over in the same way. With these words, he turned his back upon With these words, he turned his back upon Godfather Drosselmayer and the house, hastened to the table, and drew up his hussars in battle array. As for Mary, she had slipped away very gently, because the motions of the little figures in the house seemed to her to be very tiresome. But as she was a charming child, she said nothing, for fear of wounding the feelings of Godpapa Drosselmayer. Indeed, the moment Fritz turned his back, the doctor said to the judge and his wife, in a tone of vexation, "This masterpiece is not fit for children, and I will put my house back again into the box and take it away." But the judge's wife approached him, and in order to atone for her son's rudeness, begged Godfather Drosselmayer to explain to her all the secrets of the beautiful house, and praised the ingenuity of the mechanism to such an extent that she not only made the doctor forget his vexation, but put him into such a good humor that he drew from the pockets of his drab coat a number of little men and women with horn complexions, white eyes, and gilt hands and feet. Besides the beauty of their appearance, these little men and women set forth a delicious perfume because they were made of cinnamon. At this moment, Miss Trudchen called Mary and offered to help her to put on the pretty little silk frock which she had so much admired on first entering the drawing room. But Mary, in spite of her usual politeness, did not answer the governess, so much was she occupied with a new personage whom she had discovered amongst the toys, and to whom, my dear children, I must briefly direct your attention, since he is actually the hero of my tale, in which Miss Trudchen, Mary, Fritz, the judge's lady, and even Godfather Drosselmayer are only secondary characters. And last year, this is where I'm going off stage. No, it's not. It's where we're listening to the story. And I'm standing in B+ forever, and I'm getting a knee ache. Hammer is good. How you doing? I am good, Hammer. Just trying to get a little reading done. I started this last year, but I never finished it on stream. And I'm hoping I can finish it this year. And this is my first stream since, like, summer. I don't even understand what you're talking about. What about a lefty? What does that mean? Sadly not. Children, this masterpiece is not for you. Yeah, he's very proud. Dang, being told they're secondary characters. Yeah, it's quite the burn. Because oh. I get it. Just took me a second. As usual, as per tradition of when I stream, I did not sleep very much last night. Like 3-4 hours. So, okay, now I'm going off stage in the ballet. Goodbye, Sugar Plum Fairy. Emotes. Popcorn. Popcorn. Shall we continue? As we listen to we're about to listen to all the solos. The Star Wars mug, at least. Did my phone ever do the thing? Nope, it didn't. Alright, I'm gonna have to get with Keegan on that. Sorry, I'm just looking at headlines. Hey. Excuse me. Okay. The Little Man with the Wooden Cloak. I told you that Mary did not reply to the invitation of Miss Trudgeon, because she had just discovered a new toy which she had not before perceived. Indeed, by dint of making his hussars march and countermarch about the table, Fritz had brought to light a charming little gentleman who, leaning in a melancholy mood against the trunk of the Christmas tree, awaited, in silence and polite reserve, the moment when his turn to be inspected should arrive. We must pause to notice the appearance of this little man, to whom I gave the epithet charming somewhat hastily. For in addition to his body being too long and large for the miserable little thin legs which supported it, his head was of a size so enormous that it was quite at variance with the proportions indicated not only by nature, but also by those drawing masters who know much better than even nature herself. But if there were any fault in his person, that defect was atoned for by the excellence of his toilette, which denoted at once a man of education and taste. He wore a braided frock coat of violet-covered velvet, all frogged and covered with buttons, trousers of the same material, in the most charming little Wellington boots ever seen on the feet of a student or an officer. But these were two circumstances which seemed strange in respect to a man who preserved such elegant taste. The one was an ugly, narrow cloak made of wood, and which hung down like a pig's tail from the nape of his neck to the middle of his back, and the other was a wretched cap, such as peasants sometimes wear in Switzerland, upon his head. But Mary, when she perceived those two objects which seemed so unsuitable to the rest of the costume, remembered that Godfather Drosselmayer himself wore above his drab coat a little collar of no better appearance than the wooden cloak belonging to this little gentleman in the military frock, and that the doctor often covered his own bald head with an ugly and absolutely frightful cap, unlike all other ugly caps in the world, although this circumstance did not prevent the doctor from being an excellent godpapa. She even thought to herself that were Godpapa Drosselmayer to imitate altogether the dress of the little gentleman with the wooden cloak, he could not possibly become so genteel and interesting as the puppet. And here's a picture of him. He's pretty, unsightly. And this song is pretty quiet. You can very well believe that these reflections on the part of Mary were not made without a close inspection of the little man, whom she liked from the very first moment that she saw him. Then the more she looked at him, the more she was struck by the sweetness and amiability which were expressed by his countenance. His clear green eyes, which were certainly rather goggle, beamed with serenity and kindness. The frizzled beard of white cotton, extending beneath his chin, seemed to become him amazingly, because it set off the charming smile of his mouth, which was rather wide perhaps, but then the lips were as red as vermilion. Thus was it that, after examining the little man for upwards of 10 minutes, without daring to touch it, Mary exclaimed, "Oh, dear papa, whose is that funny figure leaning against the Christmas tree?" "It belongs to no one in particular," answered the judge, "but to both of you together." "How do you mean, dear papa? I don't understand you." "This little man," continued the judge, "will help you both, for it is he who in future will crack all your nuts for you, and he belongs as much to Fritz as to you, and as much to you as Fritz." Thus speaking, the judge took up the little man very carefully, and raising his wood cloak, made him open his mouth by a very simple motion, and display 2 rows of sharp white teeth. Mary then placed a nut in the little man's mouth, and crack, crack, the shell was broken into a dozen pieces, and the kernel fell whole and sound into Mary's hand. The little girl then learnt that the dandified gentleman belonged to that ancient and respectable race of nutcrackers, whose origin is as ancient as that of the town of Nuremberg, and that he continued to exercise the honorable calling of his forefathers. Mary, delighted to have made this discovery, leapt for joy, whereupon the judge said, "Well, my dear little Mary, since the Nutcracker pleases you so much, although it belongs equally to Fritz and yourself, it is to you that I especially trust it. I place it in your care." With these words, the judge handed the little fellow to Mary, who took the puppet in her arms, and began to practice it in its vocation, choosing, however, so good was her heart, the smallest nuts, that it might not be compelled to open its mouth too wide, because by so doing its face assumed a most ridiculous expression. Then Miss Trudgeon drew near to behold the little puppet in her turn, and for her also did it perform its duty in the most unassuming and obliging manner in the world, although she was but a dependent. While he was employed in training his horse and parading his hussars, Master Fritz heard the crack, crack so often repeated that he felt sure something new was going on. He accordingly looked up and turned his large inquiring eyes upon the group composed of the judge, Mary, and Miss Trudgeon, and when he observed the little man with the wooden cloak in his sister's arms, he leapt from his horse, and without waiting to put the animal in its stable, hastened toward Mary. Then what a joyous shout of laughter burst from his lips as he espied the funny appearance of the little man opening his large mouth. Fritz also demanded his share of the nuts which the puppet cracked, and this was of course granted. Next he wanted to hold the little man while he cracked the nuts, and this wish was also gratified. Only, in spite of the remonstrances of his sister, Fritz chose the largest and hardest nuts to cram into his mouth, so that at the fifth or sixth crack, and out fell 3 of the poor little fellow's teeth. At the same time, his chin fell and became tremulous like that of an old man. "Oh, my poor Nutcracker!" ejaculated Mary, snatching the little man from the hands of Fritz. "What a stupid fellow he is!" cried the boy. "He pretends to be a nutcracker, and his jaws are as brittle as glass. He's a false nutcracker, and he does not understand his duty. Give him to me, Mary. I'll make him go on cracking my nuts, even if he loses all his teeth in doing so, and his chin is dislocated entirely. But how you seem to feel for the lazy fellow." "No, no, no," cried Mary, clasping the little man in her arms. "No, you shall not have my nutcracker. See how he looks at me, as much as to tell me that his poor jaw is hurt. Fie, Fritz! You are very ill-natured. You beat your horses, and the other day you shot one of your soldiers." "I beat my horses when they're restive," said Fritz, with an air of importance. "And as for the soldier whom I shot the other day, he was a wretched scoundrel that I never have been able to do anything with for the last year, and who deserted one fine morning with his arms and baggage, a crime that is punishable by death in all countries. Besides, all these things are matters of discipline which do not regard women. I do not prevent you from boxing your doll's ears, so don't try to hinder me from whipping my horses or shooting my soldiers. But I want the nutcracker." "Papa! Papa! Help! Help!" cried Mary, wrapping the little man in her pocket handkerchief. "Help! Fritz is going to take the nutcracker from me." At Mary's cries, not only the judge drew near the child, but his wife and Godfather Drosselmayer also ran towards them. The 2 children told their stories in their own way, Mary wishing to keep the nutcracker, and Fritz anxious to have it again. But to the astonishment of Mary, Godfather Drosselmayer, with a smile that seemed perfectly frightful to the poor little girl, decided in favor of Fritz. Happily for the poor nutcracker, the judge and his wife took little Mary's part. "My dear Fritz," said the judge, "I trusted the nutcracker to the care of your sister, and as far as my knowledge of surgery goes, I see that the poor creature is unwell and requires attention. I therefore give him over solely to the care of Mary, well, until he is quite well, and no one must say a word against my decision. And you, Fritz, who stand up so firmly in behalf of military discipline, when did you ever hear of making a wounded soldier return to his duty? The wounded always go to the hospital until they are cured, and if they be disabled by the wounds, they are entitled to pensions." Fritz was about to reply, but the judge raised his forefinger to a level with his right eye and said, "Master Fritz!" You have already seen what influence those 2 words had upon the little boy. Thus, ashamed at having drawn upon himself the reprimand conveyed in those words, he slipped quietly off without giving any answer to the table where his hussars were posted. Then, having placed the sentinels in their stations, he marched off the rest to their quarters for the night. In the meantime, Mary picked up the 3 little teeth which had fallen from the nutcracker's mouth, and kept the nutcracker himself well wrapped up in the pocket handkerchief. She had also bound up his chin with a pretty white ribbon which she cut from the frock. On his side, the little man, who was at first very pale and much frightened, seemed quite contented in the care of his protectress, and gradually acquired confidence when he felt himself gently rocked in her arms. Then Mary perceived that Godfather Drosselmayer watched with mocking smiles the care which she bestowed upon the little man with the wooden cloak, and it struck her that the single eye of the doctor had acquired an expression of spite and malignity which she had never seen before. She therefore tried to get away from him, but Godfather Drosselmayer burst out laughing, saying, "Well, my dear goddaughter, I am really astonished that a pretty girl like you can be so devoted to an ugly little urchin like that." Mary turned round, and much as she loved her godfather, even the compliment which he paid her did not make amends for the unjust attack he made upon the position of her Nutcracker. She even felt, contrary to her usual disposition, very angry, and that vague comparison which she had before formed between the little man with the wooden cloak and her godfather returned to her memory. "Godpapa Drosselmayer," she said, "you are unkind towards my little Nutcracker, whom you call an ugly urchin. Who knows whether you would even look so well as he, even if you had his pretty little military coat, his pretty little breeches, and his pretty little boots?" At these words, Mary's parents burst out laughing, and the doctor's nose grew prodigiously longer. Why did the doctor's nose grow so much longer? Mary, surprised by the effect of her remark, could not guess the reason. But there are never any effects without causes. That reason no doubt belonged to some strange and unknown cause, which we must explain. Wonderful events. I didn't dance in this one, but I understudied. So it's kind of coming back to me. I'm sorry you missed the deadly injury. Well, it's not quite deadly. The Nutcracker's not dead. When in doubt, just eat cookies at everyone. That sounds good. Send me those cookies, Hammer. I'll take some. Also, our warm-up for every single class is to this song. So I probably heard this song literally thousands of times. I love it though. It's a good thing I love it. I'm gonna have to get some more tea. Alright, wonderful events. Did Fritz just yeet him on the floor? Maybe. Wonderful events. I do not know, my dear little friends, whether you remember that I spoke of a certain large cupboard with glass windows in which the children's toys were locked up. This cupboard was on the right side of the door of the judge's own room. Mary was still a baby in the cradle, and Fritz had only just begun to walk, when the judge had that cupboard made by a very skillful carpenter, who put such brilliant glass in the frames that the toys appeared 1,000 times finer when ranged on the shelves than when they were held in the hand. Upon the top shelf of all, which neither Fritz nor Mary could reach, the beautiful pieces of workmanship of Godfather Drosselmayer were placed. Immediately beneath was the shelf containing the picture books, and the 2 lower shelves were given to Fritz and Mary, who filled them in the way they liked best. It seemed, however, to have been tacitly agreed upon between the 2 children that Fritz should hold possession of the higher shelf of the 2 for the marshalling of his troops, and that Mary should keep the lower shelf for her dolls and their households. This arrangement was entered into on the eve of Christmas Day. Fritz placed his soldiers upon his own shelf, and Mary, having thrust Miss Rose into a corner, gave the bedroom, formed by the lowest shelf, to Miss Clara, with whom she invited herself to pass the evening and enjoy a supper of sugar plums. Miss Clara, on casting her eyes around, saw that everything was in proper order, her table well spread with sugar plums and conserved fruits, and her nice white bed with its white counterpane, all so neat and comfortable. She therefore felt very well satisfied with her new apartment. While all these arrangements were being made, the evening wore away. Midnight was approaching. Godfather Drosselmayer had been gone a long time, and yet the children could not be persuaded to quit the cupboard. Contrary to custom, it was Fritz that yielded first to the persuasion of his parents, who told him that it was time to go to bed. "Well," said he, "after all the exercise which my poor hussars have had today, they must be fatigued, and as those excellent soldiers all know their duty towards me, and as so long as I remain here, they will not close their eyes, I must retire." With these words, and having given them the watchword to prevent them from being surprised by a patrol of the enemy, Fritz went off to bed. But this was not the case with Mary, and as her mamma, who was about to follow her husband to their bedchamber, desired her to tear herself away from the dearly beloved cupboard, little Mary said, "Only one moment, dear mamma, a single moment. Do let me finish all I have to do here. There are 100 or more important things to put to rights, and the moment I have settled them, I promise to go to bed." Mary requested this favor in so touching and plaintive a tone, she was, moreover, so glad and obedient a child, that her mother did not hesitate to grant her request. Nevertheless, as Miss Trudchen had already gone upstairs to get Mary's bed ready, the judge's wife, thinking that her daughter might forget to put out the candles, performed that duty herself, leaving only a light in the lamp hanging from the ceiling. "Do not be long before you go to your room, dear little Mary," said the judge's wife, "for if you remain up too long, you will not be able to rise at your usual hour tomorrow morning." With these words, the lady quitted the room and closed the door behind her. The moment Mary found herself alone, she bethought herself, above all things, of her poor little Nutcracker, for she contrived to keep it in her arms, wrapped up in her pocket handkerchief. She placed him upon the table very gently, unrolled her handkerchief, and examined his chin. The Nutcracker still seemed to suffer much pain and appeared very cross. "Oh, my dear little fellow," she said in a low tone, "do not be angry, I pray, because my brother Fritz hurt you so much. He had no evil intention, rest well assured. Only his manners have become rough, and his heart is a little hardened by his soldier's life. Otherwise, he's a very good boy, I can assure you, and I know that when you are better acquainted with him, you will forgive him. Besides, to atone for the injury which he has done you, I will take care of you, which I will do so attentively that in a few days you will be quite well. As for putting in the teeth again and fastening your chin properly, that is the business of Godpapa Drosselmayer, who perfectly understands those kinds of things." Mary could say no more, for the moment she pronounced the name of her godfather Drosselmayer, the Nutcracker, to whom this discourse was addressed, made so dreadful a grimace, and his eyes suddenly flashed so brightly, that the little girl stopped short in affright, and stepped a pace back. But as the Nutcracker immediately afterwards resumed its amiable expression, and its melancholy smile, she fancied that she must have been the sport of an illusion, and that the flame of the lamp, agitated by a current of air, had thus disfigured the little man. She even laughed at herself, saying, "I am indeed very foolish to think that this wooden puppet could make faces to me. Come, let me draw near the poor fellow, and take that care of him which he requires." Having thus mused within herself, Mary took the puppet once more in her arms, drew near the cupboard, knocked at the glass door which Fritz had closed, and said to the new doll, "I beg of you, Miss Clara, to give up your bed to my poor Nutcracker who is unwell, and to shift for yourself on the sofa tonight. Remember that you are in excellent health yourself, as your round and rosy cheeks sufficiently prove. Moreover, a night is soon past, the sofa is very comfortable, and there will not be many dolls in Nuremberg as well lodged as yourself." Miss Clara, as you may well suppose, did not utter a word, but it struck Mary that she seemed very sulky and discontented. But Mary, whose conscience told her that she had treated Miss Clara in the most considerate manner, used no further ceremony with her, but drawing the bed towards her, placed the Nutcracker in it, covering him with the clothes up to the very chin. She then thought that she knew nothing as yet of the real disposition of Miss Clara, whom she had only seen for a few hours, but that as Miss Clara had appeared to be in a very bad humor at losing her bed, some evil might happen to the poor invalid if he were left with so insolent a person. She therefore placed the bed, with the Nutcracker in it, upon the second shelf, close by the ridge where Fritz's cavalry were quartered. Then, having laid Miss Clara upon the sofa, she closed the cupboard and was about to rejoin Miss Trudgeon in the bedchamber, when all around the room the poor girl heard a variety of low scratching sounds coming from behind the chairs, the store, and the cupboard. The large clock, which hung against the wall, and which was surmounted by a large gilt owl, instead of a cuckoo, as is usual with old German clocks, began that usual whirring sound which gives warning of striking. And yet it did not strike. Mary glanced towards it, and saw that the immense gilt owl had drooped its wings in such a way that they covered the entire clock, and the bird thrust forward as far as it could its hideous cat-like head, with the round eyes and the crooked beak. Then the whirring sound of the clock became louder and louder, and gradually changed into the resemblance of a human voice, until it appeared as if these words issued from the beak of the owl. "Clocks, clocks, clocks, whir, whir, whir," in a low tone. "The king of the mice has a sharp ear, sing him his old song. Strike, 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 clocks all. Sound his last hour, for his fate is nigh at hand." And then, dong, 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 the clock struck 12 in a hollow and gloomy tone. Mary was very much frightened. She began to shudder from head to foot, and she was about to run away from the room when she beheld Godfather Drosselmayer seated upon the clock instead of the owl, the two skirts of his coat having taken the place of the drooping wings of the bird. At that spectacle, Mary remained nailed, as it were, to the spot with astonishment, and she began to cry, saying, "What are you doing up there, Godpapa Drosselmayer? Come down here and don't frighten me like that, naughty Godpapa Drosselmayer." But at these words there began a sharp whistling and furious kind of tittering all around. Then in a few moments Mary heard thousands of little feet treading behind the walls, and next she saw thousands of little lights through the joints in the waistcoat. When I say little lights, I'm wrong. I mean thousands of little eyes. Mary full well perceived that there was an entire population of mice about to enter the room. And in fact, the course of 5 minutes, thousands and thousands of mice made their appearance by the creases of the door and the joints of the floor, and began to gallop hither and thither, until at length they ranged themselves in order of battle, as Fritz was wont to draw upon his wood soldiers. All this seemed very amusing to Mary, and as she did not feel towards mice that absurd alarm which so many foolish children experience, she thought she should divert herself with the sight, when there suddenly rang through the room a whistling so sharp, so terrible, and so long that a cold shudder passed over her. At the same time, a plank was raised up by some power underneath, and the king of the mice, with 7 heads all wearing gold crowns, appeared at her very feet, in the midst of the mortar and plaster that was broken up. And each of his 7 mouths began to whistle and scream horribly, while the body to which those 7 heads belonged forced its way through the opening. The entire army advanced towards the king, speaking with their little mouths 3 times in chorus. Then the various regiments marched across the room, directing their course towards the cupboard and surrounding Mary on all sides, so that she began to beat a retreat. I have already told you that Mary was not a timid child, but when she saw herself surrounded by crowds of mice, commanded by that monster with 7 heads, fear seized upon her, and her heart began to beat so violently that it seemed as if it would burst from her chest. Her blood appeared to freeze in her veins, her breath failed her, and half fainting she retreated with trembling steps. At length, purr, and the pieces of the panes in the cupboard, broken by her elbow which knocked against it, fell upon the floor. She felt at that moment an acute pain in the left arm, but at the same time her heart grew lighter, for she no longer heard that squeaking which had so much frightened her. Indeed, everything had again become quiet around her. The mice had disappeared, and she thought that, terrified by the noises of the glass which was broken, they had sought refuge in their holes. But almost immediately afterwards, a strange noise commenced in the cupboard, and numerous little sharp voices exclaimed, "To arms! To arms! To arms!" At the same time, the music of Godfather Drosselmayer's country house, which had been placed upon the top shelf of the cupboard, began to play. and on all sides she heard the words, "Quick! Rise to arms! To arms!" Mary turned round. The cupboard was lighted up in a wondrous manner, and all was bustle within. All the harlequins, the clowns, the punches, and the other puppets scampered about, while the dolls set to work to make lint and prepare bandages for the wounded. At length the Nutcracker himself threw off all the clothes and jumped off the bed, crying, "Foolish troop of mice! Return to your holes, or you must encounter me!" But at that minute a loud whistling echoed through the room, and Mary perceived that the mice had not returned to their holes, but that, frightened by the noise of the broken glass, they had sought refuge beneath the chairs and tables, whence they were now beginning to issue again. On his side, Nutcracker, far from being terrified by the whistling, seemed to gather fresh courage. "Despicable king of the mice!" he exclaimed. "It is thou, then! Thou acceptest the death which I have so long offered you? Come on, and let this night decide between us. And you, my good friends, my companions, my brethren, if it be indeed true that we are united in bonds of affection, support me in this perilous contest. On! On! Let those who love me follow!" Never did a proclamation produce such an effect. 2 harlequins, a clown, 2 punches, and 3 other puppets cried out in a loud tone, "Yes, my lord, we are yours in life and death. We will conquer under your command, or die with you." At these words, which proved that there was an echo to his speech in the heart of his friends, Nutcracker felt himself so excited that he drew his sword, and without calculating the dreadful height on which he stood, leapt from the second shelf. Mary, upon perceiving that dangerous leap, gave a piercing cry, for Nutcracker seemed on the point of being dashed to pieces, when Miss Clara, who was on the lower shelf, darted from the sofa and received him in her arms. "Oh, my dear little Clara," said Mary, clasping her hands together with emotion. "How I have mistaken your disposition." But Miss Clara, thinking only of the present events, said to the Nutcracker, "What? My lord, wounded and suffering as you are plunging headlong into new dangers. Content yourself with commanding the army, and let the others fight. Your courage is known, and you can do no good by giving fresh proof of it." And as she spoke, Clara endeavored to restrain the gallant Nutcracker by holding him tight in her arms, but he began to struggle and kick in such a manner that Miss Clara was obliged to let him glide down. He slipped from her arms and fell on his knees at her feet in a most graceful manner, saying, "Princess, believe me, that although at a certain period you were unjust towards me, I shall always remember you even in the midst of battle." Miss Clara stooped as low down as possible, and taking him by his little arm, compelled him to rise. Then taking off her waistband, all glittering with spangles, she made a scarf of it, and sought to pass it over the shoulder of the young hero. But he, stepping back a few paces, and bowing at the same time in acknowledgment of so great a favor, untied the little white ribbon with which Mary had bound up his chin, and tied it round his waist, after pressing it to his lips. Then, light as a bird, he leapt from the shelf on the floor, brandishing his saber all the time. Immediately did the squeakings and creakings of the mice begin over again, and the king of the mice, as if to reply to the challenge of the Nutcracker, issued from beneath the great table in the middle of the room, followed by the main body of his army. At the same time, the wings on the right and left began to appear from beneath the armchair under which they had taken refuge. So to answer your question, Lexi, so in the ballet, that's what happens. Fritz jumps on the Nutcracker and breaks him. But in this version, Fritz takes the Nutcracker and starts cracking huge nuts in the Nutcracker's mouth and breaks his teeth out, and then moves the chin around so it's all loose and stuff. So that's what happens in this version. Also, this is the finale. And when the music is over, I'm going to take a break so I can get some more tea. And then I will continue for a little bit longer. Apparently, I have a bookmark in here, which are Splatoon stickers, and we made it to page 78 last time. We're already on 38, so I feel like that's good. I think if I can do 50 pages a stream, then it'll be 3 streams. And oh, hey Anna, great to see you. Hi. You know me, I'm Paige. I'm being weird, I'm sorry. You made it to the finale. Thanks for being here, I'm glad to see you. Okay, we made it through the music, and that is a really good time for me to take a break. Oh, yes, I do know you. Well, now you get to see me, and I look ridiculous. Yay for super cadency music! Yep. I'm gonna take a break, and I'm gonna go grab some more tea, and I will leave you with some other music. You look cozy. Well, yeah, I've got a bunch of blankets on. I would like to make this a different size. Sure. Sure, whatever, that works. Blanket hype. Okay, so I will leave you to it, and I will be right back. I've returned. So I have some tea. I have a little snack thing. And I also brought some nutcrackers that I would like to show you. Two from my childhood. So I was at my mom's house over... Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me back to my stream. Welcome back to you all. So I was at my mom's house, over the weekend, and she found a bunch of Christmas stuff that she wanted me to go through and take home if I wanted to. And, yes, please pet Twix for me too. And so there are two nutcrackers from my childhood that I took. Ooh, his hair needs cleaned. That I remember particularly well. And I don't know that there's any story behind them, but they make me happy. It was fun to see them again. So this is the one that I remember that I, like, played with as a little girl and danced with after I saw the Nutcracker, and just, like, you know, pretended I was Clara, because every little girl does that. She dreams of dancing as Clara in the Nutcracker. So this is the Nutcracker that I remember from my childhood. And his thing is kind of wobbly too, which is fitting. It's fitting. That's him. I may have given him a name, but I don't remember. Apparently, his hair needs cleaned because there's like some gunk on it, so who knows. So that's that one. I need to put somewhere. And then this one is actually from Germany, I believe. But my mom doesn't really remember where it came from, so. But yeah, he's kind of short. His hair is a little better taken care of, I guess. Yeah, I wish it said like where it was made, but my mom remembers that it was from Germany, so. This guy was made in China, so yeah, you know. Authentic. We didn't go nowhere. We was here. We was here. And now I'm gonna eat a little cookie with a Reese's cup on it. I think I baked too early because I don't want to give these out to people now. And it's not that they're bad, but they're a few days old. Hype. It's very peanut buttery. No, I'm under the hairdryer. Okay. Do you have headphones? Can you hear? Did you see my nutcrackers? Last I heard, Clara got kicked out of her bed. Okay. So... no. We're still in the battle scene. You're good. So, all you missed was... Okay. The Mouse King made an appearance. He has 7 heads. And Mary is aware of the army of mice. And so the Nutcracker got out of bed and declared that he was going to go to war, and he summoned the troops. 7 heads is a lot. He summoned the troops and then almost fell, but Clara caught him. Isn't that awesome? The woman caught him and was like, I misjudged you and you're very brave, but you shouldn't sacrifice yourself. You should let the others fight. And now the battle is beginning. That's really all you missed. The other thing you missed was my childhood nutcrackers that my mom gave me over the weekend. And it's not really anything special, but this is the one I remember, like classic Nutcracker, and his thing is a little janky, so that's fitting. And then the other one is from Germany, but that's about all I know, and he's short and stout. I need to get my hair done after the Nutcracker too. But I don't know if she'll have any openings before Christmas, so I may have to wait until I get back. Yeah. You always wanted one. Well, I think I got a couple cheap at the Michaels a couple years ago. They're like this size, maybe a little skinnier. And they're nice. So, you can always find some at Michael's. But yeah, I've started a collection. When I get my own place, I'll have some for sure. Yeah. Yeah, having the space is also an issue, which is why part of the reason we decided to buy a house when we did. Because we were outgrowing our apartment like crazy. We just had too much stuff. We still have too much stuff. But we have a lot more room to put it in now. So. Okay, I will continue. We're at the battle. Michael's hype. I love Michael's. Okay, the battle. Trumpets, sound the charge. Oh, sorry. We're in the Nutcracker voice. Trumpets, sound the charge. Drums, beat the alarm, exclaimed the valiant Nutcracker. And at the same moment the trumpets of Fritz's hussars began to sound, while the drums of his infantry began to beat, and the rumbling of cannon was also heard. At the same time a band of musicians was formed with fat Figaros with their guitars, Swiss peasants with their horns, and Negroes with their triangles. Hey, it was written in like the 1700s. And all these persons, though not called upon by the Nutcracker, did not the less begin to descend from shelf to shelf, playing the beautiful march of the British Grenadiers. The music no doubt excited the most peaceably inclined puppets, for at the same moment a kind of militia, commanded by the beadle of the parish, was formed, consisting of harlequins, punches, clowns, and pantaloons. Arming themselves with anything that fell in their way, they were soon ready for battle. All was bustle, even to a man-cook, who, quitting his fire, came down with his spit, on which was a half-roasted turkey, and went and took his place in the ranks. The Nutcracker placed himself at the head of this valiant battalion, which, to the shame of the regular troops, was ready first. I must tell you everything, or else you might think that I am inclined to be too favorable to that glorious militia, and therefore I must say that if the infantry and cavalry of Master Fritz were not ready so soon as the others, it was because they were all shut up in 4 boxes. The poor prisoners might therefore well hear the trumpet and drum, which called them to battle. They were shut up and could not get out. Mary heard them stirring in their boxes, like crayfish in a basket. But in spite of their efforts, they could not free themselves. At length, the grenadiers, less tightly fastened in than the others, succeeded in raising the lid of their box, and then helped to liberate the light infantry. In another instant, these were free. And well knowing how useful cavalry is in a battle, they hastened to release the hussars, who began to canter gaily about and range themselves 4 deep upon the flanks. But if the regular troops were thus somewhat behindhand in consequence of the excellent discipline in which Fritz maintained them, they speedily repaired the lost time, for infantry, cavalry, and artillery began to descend with the fury of an avalanche, amidst the plaudits of Miss Rose and Miss Clara, who clapped their hands as they passed, and encouraged them with their voices, as the ladies from whom they were descended most likely were wont to do in the days of ancient chivalry. Meantime, the King of the Mice perceived that he had to encounter an entire army. In fact, the Nutcracker was in the center of his gallant band of militia. On the left was the regiment of hussars, waiting only the moment to charge. On the right was stationed a formidable battalion of infantry, while upon a footstool which commanded the entire scene of battle was a park of 10 cannon. In addition to these forces, a powerful reserve, composed of gingerbread men, and warriors made of sugar of different colors, had remained in the cupboard, and already began to bustle about. The King of the Mice had, however, gone too far to retreat, and he gave the signal by a squeak, which was repeated by all the forces under his command. At the same moment, the battery on the footstool replied with a volley of shot amongst the masses of mice. The regiment of hussars rushed onward to the charge, so that on one side the dust raised by their horses' feet, and on the other the smoke of the cannon, concealed their plain of battle from the eyes of Mary. Way to keep it PG. But in the midst of the roar of cannon, the shouts of the combatants, and the groans of the dying, she heard the voice of the Nutcracker ever rising above the din. "Sergeant Harlequin," he cried, "take 20 men, and fall upon the flank of the enemy. Lieutenant Punch, form into a square. Captain Puppet, fire in platoons. Colonel of Hussars, charge in masses, and not 4 deep as you are doing. Bravo, good leaden soldiers, bravo! If all my troops behave as well as you, the day is ours." But by these encouraging words even, Mary was at no loss to perceive that the battle was deadly, and that the victory remained doubtful. The mice, thrown back by the hussars, decimated by the fire platoons, and shattered by the park of artillery, returned again and again to the charge, biting and tearing all who came in their way. It was like the combats in the days of chivalry, a furious struggle foot to foot and hand to hand, each one bent upon attack or defense without waiting to think of his neighbor. Nutcracker vainly endeavored to direct the evolutions in a disciplined manner and form his troops into dense columns. The hussars, assailed by numerous corps of mice, were scattered and failed to rally around their colonel. A vast battalion of enemy had cut them off from the main body of their army, and had actually advanced up to the militia, which performed prodigies of valor. The beadle of the parish used his battle axe most gallantly. The man-cook ran whole ranks of mice through with his spit. The leaden soldiers remained firm as a wall, but Harlequin and his 20 men had been driven back, and were forced to retreat under cover of the battery, and Lieutenant Punch's square had been broken up. The remains of his troops fled and threw the militia into disorder, and Captain Puppet, doubtless for want of cartridges, had ceased to fire and was in full retreat. In consequence of this backward movement through the line, the park of cannon was exposed. The King of the Mice, perceiving that the success of the fight depended upon the capture of the battery, ordered his bravest troops to attack it. The footstool was accordingly stormed in a moment, and the artillerymen were cut to pieces by the side of their cannon. One of them with 20 of his One of them set fire to his powder wagon and met an heroic death with 20 of his comrades. But all this display was useless against numbers, and in a short time a volley of shot, fired upon them from their own cannon, and which swept the forces commanded by the Nutcracker, convinced him that the battery of the footstool had fallen into the hands of the enemy. From that moment the battle was lost, and the Nutcracker now thought only of beating an honorable retreat. But in order to give breathing time to his troops, he summoned the reserve to his aid. Thereupon the gingerbread men and the corps of sugar warriors descended from the cupboard and took part in the battle. They were certainly fresh, but very inexperienced troops. The gingerbread men especially were very awkward, and hitting right and left did as much injury to friends as to enemies. The sugar warriors stood firm, but they were of such different natures, emperors, knights, Tyrolese peasants, gardeners, cupids, monkeys, lions, and crocodiles, that they could not combine their movements and were strong only as a mass. Their arrival, however, produced some good, for scarcely had the mice tasted the gingerbread men and the sugar warriors when they left the leaden soldiers, whom they found very hard to bite, and turned also from the punches, harlequins, beetles, and cooks, who were only stuffed with bran, to fall upon the unfortunate reserve, which in a moment was surrounded by thousands of mice, and after an heroic defense, devoured arms and baggage. Nutcracker attempted to profit by that moment to rally his army, but the terrible spectacle of the destruction of the reserve had struck terror to the bravest hearts. Captain Puppet was as pale as death, Harlequin's clothes were in rags, a mouse had penetrated into Punch's hump, and like the youthful Spartan's fox, began to devour his entrails, and not only was the colonel of the hussars a prisoner with a large portion of his troops, but the mice had even formed a squadron of cavalry by means of horses thus taken. The unfortunate Nutcracker had no chance of victory left. He could not even retreat with honor, and therefore he determined to die. He placed himself at the head of a small body of men, resolved like himself to sell their lives dearly. In the meantime, terror reigned among the dolls. Miss Clara and Miss Rose wrung their hands and gave vent to loud cries. "Alas," exclaimed Miss Clara, "must I die in the flower of my youth, I, the daughter of a king, and born to such brilliant destinies?" "Alas," said Miss Rose, "am I doomed to fall into the hands of the enemy, and be devoured by the filthy mice?" The other dolls ran about in tears, their cries mingling with those of Miss Clara and Miss Rose. Meanwhile, matters went worse and worse with Nutcracker. He was abandoned by the few friends who had remained faithful to him. The remains of the squadron of hussars took refuge in the cupboard. The leaden soldiers had all fallen into the power of the enemy. The cannoneers had long previously been dispersed, and the militia was cut to pieces like 300 Spartans of Leonidas without yielding a step. Nutcracker had planted himself against the lower part of the cupboard, which he vainly sought to climb up. He could not do so without the aid of Miss Rose or Miss Clara, and they had found nothing better to do than to faint. Nutcracker made a last effort, collected all his courage, and cried in an agony of despair, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" But as in the case of Richard III, his voice remained without even an echo, or rather betrayed him to the enemy. Two of the rifle brigade of the mice seized upon his wooden cloak, and at the same time the king of the mice cried with his 7 mouths, "On your heads, take him alive! Remember that I have my mother to avenge! This punishment must serve as an example to all future Nutcrackers!" And with these words the king rushed upon the prisoner. But Mary could no longer support that horrible spectacle. "Oh, my poor Nutcracker!" she exclaimed. "I love you with all my heart and cannot see you die thus." At the same moment, by a natural impulse and without precisely knowing what she was doing, Mary took off one of her shoes and threw it with all her force in the midst of the combatants. Her aim was so good that the shoe hit the king of the mice and made him roll over in the dust. A moment afterwards, king and army, conquerors and conquered, all alike disappeared as if by enchantment. Mary felt a more severe pain than before in her arm. She endeavored to reach an armchair to sit down, but her strength failed her, and she fainted. PG hype! Hooray for the girl saving the guy. I have so much more cross-stitching than I could ever finish my life. What projects are you working on, Anna? Can now confirm Twix is doing well and she's gotten pets. Good. King Terror rules the dolls. And Lulu, don't forget Lulu. Tragic when birder happens? Ooh. I'm hungry. Okay, I'll probably try to do the next section. Which may be long, actually. Okay, well the next... Yeah, the next section is pretty long. Although I can... No. Okay. I have a little bit more to read. About 5 pages, and then I will call it for today. Lulu says a horse sometimes when you kill her. When murder happens. Okay. The illness. When Mary awoke from her deep sleep, she found herself lying in her little bed, and the sun penetrated radiant and brilliant through the windows. By her side was seated a gentleman whom she shortly perceived to be a surgeon named Vandelstern, and who said in a low voice the moment she opened her eyes, "She is awake." Then the judge's wife advanced towards the bed and gazed upon her daughter for a long time with an anxious air. "Oh, my dear mamma!" exclaimed little Mary upon seeing her mother. "Are all those horrible mice gone, and is my poor Nutcracker saved?" "For the love of heaven, my dear Mary, do not repeat all that nonsense," said the lady. "What have mice, I should like to know, to do with the Nutcracker? But you, naughty girl, have frightened us all sadly, and it is always so when children are obstinate and will not obey their parents. You played with your toys very late last night. You most likely fell asleep, and it is probable that a little mouse frightened you. At all events, in your alarm, you thrust your elbow through one of the panes of the cupboard and cut your arm in such a manner that Mr. Vandelstern, who has just extracted the fragments of glass, declares that you ran a risk of cutting an artery and dying through loss of blood. Heaven be thanked that I awoke. I know not at what o'clock, and that recollecting how I left you in the room, I went down to look after you. Poor child, you were stretched upon the floor near the cupboard, and all around you were strewed the dolls, the puppets, the punches, the leaden soldiers, pieces of the gingerbread men, and Fritz's hussars, all scattered about pell-mell, while in your arms you held the Nutcracker. But how was it that you had taken off one of your shoes, and that it was at some distance from you?" "Oh, my dear mother," said Mary, shuddering as she thought of what had taken place. "All that you saw was caused by the great battle that took place between the puppets and the mice. But the reason of my terror was that I saw the victorious mice about to seize upon the poor Nutcracker who commanded the puppets. And it was then that I threw my shoe at the king of the mice. After that I know not what happened." The surgeon made a sign to the judge's lady, who said in a soft tone to Mary, "Do not think any more of all that, my dear child. All the mice are gone, and the little Nutcracker is safe and comfortable in the glass cupboard." The judge then entered the room and conversed for a long time with the surgeon, but of all that they said Mary could only catch these words, "It is delirium." Mary saw immediately that her story was not believed, but that it was looked upon as fable, and she did not say any more upon the subject, but allowed those around her to have their own way. for she was anxious to get up as soon as possible and pay a visit to the poor Nutcracker. She, however, knew she had escaped safe and sound from the battle, and that was all she cared about for the present. Nevertheless, Mary was very restless. She could not play on account of her wounded arm, and when she tried to read or look over her picture books, everything swam so before her eyes that she was obliged to give up the task. Time hung very heavily upon her hands, and she looked forward with impatience to the evening, because her mamma would come and sit by her and tell her pleasant stories. One evening, the judge's wife had just ended the pretty tale of Prince Farquaadin, when the door opened and Godfather Drosselmayer thrust in his head, saying, "I must see with my own eyes how the little invalid gets on." But when Mary perceived Godfather Drosselmayer with his glass wig, his black patch, and his drab frock coat, the remembrance of the night when the Nutcracker lost the famous battle against the mice, returned so forcibly to her mind that she could not prevent herself from crying out, "Oh, Godpapa Drosselmayer, you were really very ugly. I saw you quite plainly when you were astride upon the clock, and when you covered it with your wings to prevent it from striking, because it would have frightened away the mice. I heard you call the king with the 7 heads. Why did you not come to the aid of my poor Nutcracker? Naughty Godpapa Drosselmayer. For by not coming, you were the cause of my hurting myself and having to keep to my bed." The judge's wife listened to all this with a kind of stupor, for she thought that the poor little girl was relapsing into delirium. She therefore said in a low tone of alarm, "What are you talking about, Mary? Are you taking leave of your senses?" "Oh, no," answered Mary, "and Godpapa Drosselmayer knows that I'm telling the truth." But the godfather, without saying a word, made horrible faces, like a man who was sitting upon thorns. Then all of a sudden he began to chant these lines in a gloomy sing-song tone. "Old clock bell beat, low, dull, and hoarse. Advance, retreat, thou gallant force. The bell's lone sound proclaims around the hour of deep midnight, and the piercing note from the screech owl's throat puts the king himself to flight. Old clock bell, beat, low, dull, and hoarse. Advance, retreat, thou gallant force." Mary contemplated Godfather Drosselmayer with increasing terror, for he now seemed to her more hideously ugly than usual. She would indeed have been dreadfully afraid of him if her mother had not been present, and if Fritz had not at that moment entered the room with a loud shout of laughter. "Do you know, Godpapa Drosselmayer," said Fritz, "that you are uncommonly amusing today? You seem to move about just like my Punch that stands behind the store. And as for the song, it's not common sense." "My dear doctor," she said, "your song is very strange, and appears to me to be only calculated to make little Mary—" Oh, I don't know who's talking here. "Make little Mary worse." "Nonsense!" cried Godfather Drosselmayer. "Do you not recognize the old chant which I am in the habit of humming when I mend your clocks?" At the same time he seated himself near Mary's bed and said to her in a rapid tone, "Do not be angry with me, my dear child, because I did not tear out the 14 eyes of the king of the mice with my own hands, but I knew what I was about. And now, as I am anxious to make it up with you, I will tell you a story." "What story?" asked Mary. "The history of the Krakatuk Nut and Princess Pirlipata. Do you know it?" "No, my dear Godpapa," replied Mary, whom the offer of a story reconciled to the doctor that moment. "Go on." "My dear doctor," said the judge's wife, "I hope that your story will not be so melancholy as your song." "Oh, no, my dear lady," returned Godfather Drosselmayer. "On the contrary, it is very amusing." "Tell it to us, then," cried both the children. Godfather Drosselmayer accordingly began in the following manner. And that is where we will end. And the next time we will start with the history of the Krakatuk Nut and Princess Pirlipata. And that is a long section of the story, which is interesting. It's a really long section. The majority of the book. Yeah. Welcome for clapping. Thank you for clapping. Lulu killed by me for HS birthday. Some heroes don't wear capes. I was up for a bit, but yay for Twix doing well and getting pets. Glad you're safe. Terror is increasing. Yay for more terror. Thank you for clapping. Thank you all for being here. I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it as well. We will continue. I'm not sure when we will continue. Let me look at my calendar here. Aw, Terry. Thank you for being you. So, I may be able to do a stream tomorrow, maybe noon or 1 p.m. Central. But I will keep you guys updated. And I appreciate you all, and I hope all your holiday plans are going well and that you're not stressed and you're enjoying your time and spending time with loved ones. I'm good at being me, so I just roll with it. Yay for more potential future streams. Yes, I would like to finish this before Christmas, but we got 50 pages in, so we made great progress today. So yeah. So next time we will continue, and I'm looking forward to it. I will keep you all updated. Thank you for being here. Have a great day. I'll see you all later. Bye.